Production support for this film is made possible, in part by OrchardRevolution.com. We dare you to plant 5 fruit trees. It seemed like every time that I turned on the television, the news media was always reporting on the same problems in the world. They would report on America's healthcare crisis, where 1 in 3 Americans are obese, and 1 in 10 have diabetes, or glaciers melting from environmental pollution. I was tired of hearing about the same problems year after year after year. So I decided I wanted to find the people who are taking action to improve either their personal health or the health of our environment. I started my quest by interviewing doctors about obesity. I wanted to better understand the problem. How big is the obesity problem in America?
It's really big.
So the obesity problem in America is absolutely getting worse, and it's been heading in that direction for a number of years.
I think the obesity problem in America, as much as I'd like to think it's getting better, is at best plateauing.
So how does America's obesity problem compare to the rest of the world? According to the Central Intelligence Agency World Factbook, 34% of Americans are obese. And in China, only 3% of their population is obese.
You know, the diets that we're living, the stressed out lifestyles we're living, the electronic lifestyles we're living, the lack of exercise are the causes of the modern chronic diseases.
I think the role of food in obesity as well as acute and chronic disease is key. I think it's probably the most important thing.
And if we don't look at that and we don't start changing it, we're number one, if everything goes back to economy, we're going to go bankrupt.
In 2008, medical spending attributed to obesity was $147 billion.
But second of all, and even more important to people's lives, is we're going to die younger. The next generation is thought to be maybe the first generation that won't live as long as their parents did.
300,000 Americans die each year from obesity.
So much attention is being paid to obesity around our country. So much funding from National Institutes of Health and other research organizations are going towards obesity research to try to figure out how to best deal with this problem in our country. So it's a huge issue for our nation. Some people even argue that it is a national security issue. There are definitely people on the military side of our society who want to see our population more fit.
National government has actually done evaluations even for the military of our national defense concerns for our obesity epidemic in this country. That document exists, and it's on public knowledge, and I've actually downloaded it off the internet. So that does exist, and our government and our country is very aware, and our medical institutions you know, the American Medical Association, the American Osteopathic Association are very, very, very concerned about the obesity epidemic that's out there.
When I see somebody who is obese or has a problem with fat metabolism, I'm not so concerned that, oh, well, you know, you're getting fat and we have to do something because you're getting fat or that you are fat. My concern is what is your body telling you and me about what's going on internally? It's saying that something, you are not getting something. So if your food doesn't have the nutrients that your body needs, why wouldn't you be hungry? You are hungry. So eat more stuff. But the stuff you eat still doesn't have the nutrients.
I wanted to learn more about the challenges of being overweight. So I met with Jessica, who is about to start a 12-week program for better health.
Not everybody who's overweight is living this life of like gluttony. That, you know, that's not always the case. So I think people make a lot of assumptions and judgments about you and treat you very different when you're not that, you know, model picture of a woman.
Are you at a greater risk for a heart attack right now?
I would assume. I mean, I do have high blood pressure, and I know that the first time I ever saw that on a paper, no doctor had called me that, and I looked at papers at the doctor's office and saw morbid obesity. I was horrified because I never would have classified myself that way. But diabetes is a higher risk. The risks are the longer I keep this weight on, the higher the chances are of me getting, I mean, even cancer has been linked to being obese. And so I just said I need to be around for my kids.
I can't tell you, I don't know of a study, but anecdotally, we see that there is an awful lot of obesity associated with women who have breast cancer.
So the consequences of obesity are future health risks. So we worry about a number of different things when someone is gaining weight too rapidly. We worry about heart health, blood pressure, cholesterol levels. We worry about diabetes, sleep apnea, which is when you have pauses in your respirations during sleep. There's a myriad of other issues. There's a very strong relationship also between obesity and cancer risk.
I think the health crisis in America definitely relates to obesity, but obesity isn't the problem. Obesity is the symptom and the sign. So obesity is what happens from everything else that's going on. So related to obesity, and if you go backwards and look at obesity as a result of problems relating to insulin and high circulating insulin, then you can look at the fact that so many tumors have insulin receptors. Breast cancer has insulin receptors. Those insulin receptors don't seem to develop insulin resistance. So in a high carbohydrate environment where you have to have high insulin levels all the time, what does that say for your tumor growth? It feeds the tumor.
What's going to be the game plan?
Game plan is for Jessica and I to connect, find out what her goals are, find out what's motivating her and what's stopping her, and working through any limiting factors and tapping into the exciting pieces of it, and just really structured goals and sticking to a game plan.
And a lot of people try to lose weight, but a lot of people fail. Why do you think that is?
They don't stick to it because life sets in, and usually you're the last person that gets taken care of. There's kids, there's family, there's work, there's other loved ones. Everybody is crunched for time, and usually that's the first thing that goes. And it's not a matter of people, not wanting it and not being willing to stick to it. It's just the time commitment and the drive to stick to what you say you're going to do.
Then, I met with Daryl, who is also starting a 12-week fitness program.
From doctor visits over the years, I ended up with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, so I ended up going on meds for those, which I'd rather not take meds, every day for the rest of my life. So there's a lot of things going on. that, you know, it was pretty obvious. I mean, you know, walk up 2 flights of stairs and be out of breath. I mean, all those things, you know, make it pretty obvious that I needed to get in shape.
Daryl starts his fitness program by meeting with Maria Glad. She's a registered nurse and wellness coach. She's establishing a baseline for measuring Daryl's progress in the weeks ahead.
So I wish that I had a pill that made everybody turn into, you know, a healthy, lean person. And if someone ever invents that pill, you know, they will be able to retire early. I think obesity is so complicated. The physiology of obesity is so complex. There probably is no such pill to be invented. What I tell my patients is we do have that medicine, and it's called good eating and exercise.
After 6 weeks, I check back in with Jessica and Daryl. During the Labor Day weekend, Daryl plants an apple tree with his family. He's planting this tree to celebrate his successful weight loss so far. After exercising and eating healthily for 12 weeks, I check back in with Daryl and Jessica to see their final results.
Get the scale ready. It's right next to you. And you're going to wait for the green light.
Alrighty.
You did it! Yes! 215.8.
Wow.
Yay! You did it.
In just 12 weeks, Jessica has lost 16 pounds and Daryl has lost 20 pounds.
And your BMI started out at 37.9 and it is now 33. And I know you went and saw your primary care doctor. You were able to get off your statin. Your physician said you're going to be evaluated in 6 months to come off high blood pressure medication.
I think it was exciting for me because I remember when I started, I told you that a 3.0 on the treadmill was like a full run for me.
Yep.
And then I was warming up and
It was
easily
too easy.
doing a 3.2.
Are the results with Daryl abnormal, or could other people do this? Is this?
Oh, other people definitely do this.
But my knees feel better than they did. My back feels better, you know, so there's lots of other benefits.
Loved the experience and I thank
Yeah.
you so much for that. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think even every time I met with you, you pushing me to say, no, you need to go up, you know, to a higher weight.
Yep.
I might not have done that on my own, you know,
Yeah.
or known that it was okay to do that on my own. So I think that was a huge help.
You know, the way he talks about how he thinks about food differently now than he ever did before, how he plans for things, it tells me that he's made some real changes, that he's incorporated.
So sometimes those small choices, a series of small choices, you know, can have as big an impact as, you know, just one thing. You know, I don't snack at night, and, you know, if I do snack, I'm probably grabbing an apple or a banana. I'm not grabbing a, you know, I used to say, well, I'll have a couple of chips. Well, you sit down with a bag and the next thing you know, oh, look, the chips are gone, you know, and it's 10 o'clock at night. You know, it's just, so again, it's a series of small choices. Start making them, tell people what you're doing, and track your progress and stick to it.
And what do these trees symbolize to you? Why are they important to you?
Well, I think it gives us access to healthy snacks. Every day the kids come home and want a snack, and I'm excited that maybe next fall we'll be able to say, grab an apple off the backyard.
It's good for the environment because some trees are getting cut down every day. More.
What fruit trees do I get next?
We talked about pear.
Pierre?
I'm encouraged to see that obesity can be overcome by eating healthily and exercising. But what about diabetes? a disease which affects roughly 1 in 10 Americans. I don't know anything about diabetes, so I decide to meet with some families that are affected by it. I want to learn about diabetes, and I want to learn what action can be taken to stop it.
So when we're talking about diabetes in adults, most of them have type 2 diabetes, and that usually, not always, but usually is connected to having excess weight. What diabetes means is your body can no longer control blood sugar. We all need sugar in our body as a source of fuel. It's the fundamental source of fuel. Most of the things that we eat turn into sugar. And when you have type 2 diabetes, you are resistant to the hormone insulin. So insulin is what you need to control sugars in your body, to utilize sugars in your body. When you have type 2 diabetes, you make lots of insulin, but it doesn't work anymore. So anyone with extra weight starts to go down this path of insulin being made at very high levels and not working as well as it should in the body.
These maps are from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. On the left side, you can see the percentage of Americans who are obese. On the right side, you can see the percentage of Americans who are diagnosed with diabetes. The Southeast U.S. leads the nation in poor health on both maps. There is also a clear correlation between high rates of obesity and high rates of diabetes.
So the most serious complications of diabetes stem from vascular disease, and by that we mean the blood vessels start not working as well as they should. Blood vessels start to become narrow, and that happens in small blood vessels and large blood vessels. So you start to see things like the heart not working well, or heart attacks in poorly controlled diabetes. You start to see things where the small blood vessels go, which is in your hands and feet. That's why many people think of amputations and foot problems in people with diabetes. That's very much a risk. Your kidneys are very sensitive to blood sugar, and over time, if the blood vessels going to the kidneys are damaged, you start to get into kidney failure. The eyes are also very sensitive. So we talk about vascular disease and diabetes as being a major problem, heart attacks, amputations, also eye disease and kidney disease as the major problems that we see as a complication of diabetes.
I have neuropathy, very bad in my feet. I can hardly feel my feet.
As it went on, I had more trouble with my legs.
Do you think that Americans are aware of diabetes? Do you think there's enough awareness in America of this problem?
No, I don't think there is.
Things got worse, and they said that I'd have to lose one. And my right one went first.
And how old were you when they took that one?
45, I guess.
So when you were 40 or 45, they cut off one of your legs.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And then did the problem go away after that, or no?
Yeah, it seemed to for a while.
Yeah.
And then the other one started, so it was about a year and a half later the left one went.
Wow.
Well, there's a lot of things I can't do,
Yeah.
like reach the top of the cupboard or anything.
Yeah.
So I have to have help with some of that stuff, and I try to have things down where I can reach most of it.
I think all people think, oh, I'm not going to get that.
Why is it important for you to plant a fruit tree? What does that fruit tree symbolize to you?
That's going to remind me every time I see that about diabetes and eating healthy.
Do you think the tree will help you eat more healthy just seeing it?
I hope so. You know, I try very hard, even though I look very obese. You know, if I could exercise and do stuff, you know, it would be much better. But
that's awesome.
Yes, I really think, you know, looking at it's going to inspire me. I hope it does.
Do you wish that you could, warn other Americans about how serious this is?
Well, I think just looking at me, most people realize, but you don't see a lot of people, so in my everyday life around here, so because I don't get out too much the way I am.
I admire Loretta for her positive attitude, despite having endured such hardship. After meeting Loretta, it occurs to me, maybe the reason Americans don't realize how serious diabetes is is because diabetics like her and Jane don't often get out in public. I wonder if there's any hope for stopping diabetes.
So diabetes can be reversible, and type 2 diabetes, because it is more related to weight, often is reversible if a person gets healthier. This is especially true in the young patients that I treat as a pediatric endocrinologist. So we absolutely have kids who are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. They may be very sedentary, they may have extra weight, and if we get them going on some positive changes in their life, eating more fruits and vegetables, exercising more, some of these simple fundamental things, they can totally reverse their physiology to a point where they don't need the medicines that I'm prescribing anymore. So it's absolutely reversible.
I was diagnosed with diabetes a while back, and the way I got rid of it was to change the diet. Change the diet, change your attitude, and then everything came around the right way. But as long as you go into the store and you have them make your dinner for you, or you pick up the boxes of stuff and you don't cook your own things, the processed stuff causes this to happen.
And did you have type 1 or type 2 diabetes?
Type 2.
Wow. And now it's gone?
Gone.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Production support for this film is made possible in part by OrchardRevolution.com. We dare you to plant 5 fruit trees. It's encouraging to know there are people taking action to overcome obesity and diabetes. There is some hope for improving the health of humanity. But now, I wonder, is there any hope for improving the health of our environment? Next, I meet with several environmental experts. I want to better understand environmental pollution.
The obesity epidemic, the diabetes epidemic, really is sort of a sign that we have developed an unhealthy relationship with food. We've become very reliant on processed and industrial foods.
But the whole food system is built around oil, right from the planting to the shipping and so forth.
The way that we produce food now is reliant very heavily on fossil fuels. The calculation or the equation is that it takes about 10 calories of fossil fuel energy to produce 1 calorie of food energy in a highly industrialized food system like the one we have here in the United States. So that's one of the reasons that people could be concerned that the way that we're eating right now is not good for the climate.
According to the Capital Area Food Bank of Washington, D.C., on average, fresh fruit travels 2,416 miles before being consumed.
No, there's certainly not enough environmental consciousness today. We're just consuming resources at an alarming rate and not really thinking about what impact it's having on the environment.
And so a negative externality, right, is something like carbon, which is a greenhouse gas, and when emitted it contributes to climate change. Well, there's no tax on carbon, there's no the regulations starting to come out in California and other places, but up until recently, industry could pump out as much carbon as it wanted, and it wasn't polluting. That wasn't considered to be a pollutant at all. So that's a negative externality that goes into something like transporting your tomato from Mexico or California or somewhere else all the way across the country or into the United States. It's not built into the cost of the food, right? So we can have what I'd call an artificially low price for those essential commodities.
According to the United States Department of Agriculture and Economic Research Service, Americans imported 38 billion pounds of fruits and nuts in 2009. I wonder how many gallons of gasoline were burned to import 38 billion pounds of food in a single year. And then I wonder, what would the total number of gallons be over the course of my entire lifetime?
For the first time in the history of our species, we have probably the lowest percentage of our population involved in the production of some of its own food. The lowest, if you think about it, in the US, I believe in 2006, it hit its lowest point in terms of people who identified as being gardening at that time. It might have gone up a little bit since the recession, but the lowest number of humans, percentage-wise, actively engaged in some of their own food production.
Is that a risk, you think?
What do you think?
The negative externality, that cost that's not built into the price of that piece of fruit, is eventually going to catch up with us.
For us, the most recent thing we've looked at is the oil crisis in the Gulf of Mexico, where in 2010 you had, I can't remember the number, but an extremely high amount of oil from the BP well exploding, released in the Gulf of Mexico. And you think, that's one of our biggest fisheries. That's where a lot of marine species go to reproduce. And maybe we shouldn't be drilling there. I mean, part of it is you think, okay, maybe we started drilling there and that was okay, but now that we've really screwed it up, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. And the first year we launched a voyage right after it happened, and we couldn't get that close. Got within a couple miles of the epicenter of the accident. Because there were a lot of ships cleaning it up and trying to make things better. The next year we got right on top of the epicenter, and it was like a desert on the ocean. There was no wildlife. There was nothing for as far as you could see. It was really kind of an eerie experience, and you think about, a number of people died right there. But the following year, last year, we went out, and there's now 4 rigs right around where that one exploded. And so we don't seem to learn from our mistakes.
I think we are currently living in a time of sort of a broad spectrum of environmental concerns that are very much linked to our economic practices, our land use practices. Some people would bundle them under an umbrella term of biodevastation, which has to do with the degradation of soil, water, air, sort of species diversity, habitat diversity.
But right now, our environment is laden with lots of different chemicals from industry, from everyday use that accumulate in the environment.
It's quite dire. There's no two ways about it. And even though some rivers in the U.S. might be cleaner than they were in the 70s, for example, we may certainly have exported our environmental problems to other parts of the world, which is equally reprehensible. So I think, looking at root causes and taking a systems approach, we need to look at this whole spate of problems and identify underlying causes and really shift those as much as possible.
One of the things that get lost in the global warming, climate change discussion, we focus a lot on our carbon output. And that as a human society, we've been producing more and more carbon, and that's what's creating a lot of the problem, which is true. But part of the equation we don't talk about is that we've lost a lot of trees, we've cleared a lot of forest. I was just out at a conference in San Francisco and looking back at the city and seeing the amazing number of houses that are crammed on, when you're in San Francisco Bay and you're looking at the city, there's just houses everywhere and hardly any trees. And you think back, once upon a time, that was probably all covered with trees. And we've just cleared out so many trees that the trees aren't there to pull the carbon out of the air that we're producing. And so I think we're affecting it on both sides. We're producing too much carbon, and we're eliminating the trees and plants that pull the carbon out.
After talking to the environmental experts, it's clear that humanity is burning fossil fuels to ship food vast distances. Humanity is also polluting the air with carbon dioxide. But the good news is that by planting fruit trees locally, we can reduce the gasoline used to ship food. Furthermore, through photosynthesis, trees convert carbon dioxide into oxygen. It's clear to me now that planting fruit trees is part of a long-term solution to cleaning our environment. If we're serious about cleaning our environment, then we need every single neighborhood in America to plant fruit trees. But is that realistic? All right, so Pat, what's happened here?
Well, that's a good question. I came home yesterday and
walked out on my back porch to, I think there were 48 trees that I counted, and my husband was nowhere in sight, and I was just thinking, whoa, what's going on? And we had been talking about getting some fruit trees, dwarf-size ones that we could...
Just a few.
Well, yeah, a couple of apples, a couple of peaches, a couple of pears, a couple of cherries, just enough for us. We're only two of us. We don't need a whole lot. And we wanted to have berries and bushes and that sort of thing. So I was assuming that this was part of the plan, but I was kind of surprised when I saw everything. In fact, I started laughing out loud when I saw this yesterday. And then called him and asked him where he was, and he was at the store buying more. Sort of like, okay. Wondering how it was going to be paid for and stuff, but besides the point, what were we going to do with these things? That's when he said that he was planning on, going to neighbors and trying to figure out who would want to support such a thing.
And Pat, what do you think is going to be the neighborhood reception? Are you worried at all or no?
I'm not worried, but I'm hopeful that people would want some of these trees. I just think it would be really cool to be, the fruit tree capital of Portland, Rosemont fruit tree. Who knows, maybe they'll change the name of the street,
2 days later, I attend a meeting at Alistair and Pat's house, where they share their vision with their neighbors.
The permits are just if we plan on the Esplanade, is that right?
Right.
So what's your timeline with these trees that are sitting in bags in your backyard?
They need to be in the ground within 1 to 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
So, and I think it's doable. I think it's doable.
How long is the permit process?
That's why I'm meeting with...
so you'll get a sense on Wednesday of how long it would take to get things.
It's about addressing all of these things: peak oil, climate change, economic instability, wage issues. It's about creating food security in a sense.
Food prices have been increasing. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in the past 10 years, the national average cost of apples has increased by 38% per pound. Broccoli is up 87%, chicken prices are up 98%, and dried beans are up 93%.
I just see this as a great way of bonding and being closer. And I wasn't joking when I said about the party for, the cider press. I have this vision of a giant cider press party, where we get together as a neighborhood and rent a press and people bring whatever fruits they want pressed.
Find out where the interest is and identify where people would want trees, get their contact information.
10 days later, I watched the neighbors come together to plant fruit trees at dozens of houses on the street. They plant 49 fruit trees in just a couple of hours. Production support for this film is made possible in part by OrchardRevolution.com. We dare you to plant 5 fruit trees. I've seen a lot of people planting fruit trees, but I still don't know the best way for growing them. So I traveled to New Hampshire to meet with the guru of orchards, Michael Phillips. want to learn his techniques for growing organic fruit. Michael is the author of the book, The Holistic Orchard. Over the past 25 years, Michael has planted over 500 fruit trees. He currently manages about 240 on his property.
You can plant fruit trees in both late fall and early spring. Now, when you're further north like I am here in New Hampshire, say zone 5, zone 4, zone 3 for sure, spring planting is a better bet, just because if you don't take enough care and you leave air pockets, the tree is just as likely to be pushed out by the frost action, heaving and thawing the ground. The first thing you need to do in planting a fruit tree and really wanting to give it all the advantage it can get is to dig a good-sized hole. So here I'm talking on something on the order of 30-36 inches across and 16-18 inches deep. Now that's probably bigger than your root system, but what you're doing is you're loosening the earth for those roots to get a toehold into the soil. Another thing you want to do is provide certain minerals. So rock phosphate, azomite clay, which has all kinds of trace minerals, can be really valuable to give that tree the things it needs to get going. What you don't want to do is super enrich that hole. Take out all the native soil and put in great compost. Maybe up to 25% could be compost in poor soil. But what happens, the roots kind of get this sense of, hey, it's really great to be in this particular hole this guy dug, and then they reach the edge and say, it's not so nice out there, I'm not going any further. And it's almost like creating a pot. So you don't want to get away from the character of the native soil totally. What you will do over time is build good soil from the top down, just like nature does. So as mulches decompose and you spread compost, that's where you're building the soil for the long term. And the ideal thing for fruit trees and for berries, nut trees as well, is what is known as ramial wood chips. And this is a concept that came to us from Quebec. This particular pile comes from a landscape buddy who dumped a day's work here. You can go to the landscape center, but typically most of the wood mulch you'll find there is softwood derived. It's either the bark of trees that are used to make mill out 2x4s and framing lumber, or sometimes it's hemlock or cedar. Well, none of that is the hardwood deciduous type material I'm talking about when I talk about ramial wood chips. This is something you're either going to make it on your own, you're going to have a landscape friend, you're going to look for those people who clear along the roads or under the power lines and somehow get them to dump a load at your house. That's a real treasure. I get around to spreading the ramial wood chip mulch either in the fall after the harvest or in early spring. And in the fall, there's a number of important things going on underneath the apple tree. Now, the leaves are not quite off. Most of this work is going to take place at that point. But what I want to do is really help the biology get those leaves decomposed, because the leaves are going to carry over some of the disease organisms till next spring. So when I come in and dump a load of wood chips on top of fallen leaves, I'm not trying to mulch the tree the way we think of in the garden or in a very neat yard. I'm emulating nature's ways, and a branch falls here, leaves pile up here because the wind blew them there. And these wood chips are going to decompose over the course of 2-3 years and suppress the growth in this area. All kinds of plants out in the orchard help create the orchard ecosystem. And one of the really stalwarts, as far as I'm concerned, is a medicinal herb called comfrey. Now, comfrey is what permaculture people would call a dynamic accumulator. It has a big, deep taproot. And that taproot, in turn, is bringing up minerals from the subsoil, which go into the leaf of the comfrey, which when the plant falls over and decomposes, that calcium is made available to the tree. So it's mining from deeper down. Comfrey is basically a living mulch plant. There's been about 3 rounds of growth this season. And you can even see one of the earlier rounds has fallen over. Well, that helps suppress growth. And that just makes a little bit more room for the feeder roots of the fruit trees. This blackness is a fungi feeding on the surface. Now, I have a friend who actually says, my apples come with a free coating of probiotics. Another way of looking at it is it's an edible mushroom. But if it bothers you, the point is, with a wet cloth or even a little spit, you can rub it off. It's not an issue. It's it's benign. When a fruit grower grafts, because we graft not only apples, but also pears and cherries and plums and peaches, what we are doing is taking 1 or 2 buds from the variety that we want, and we are essentially splicing it in to another root system. These are some of the trees I grafted 3 springs ago, and these will be being planted out in a orchard at official spacing next spring. They're rather big, but they're very healthy and they're very robust. They've been growing in a ramio wood chip mulch bed. When this was all the size of a pencil in diameter, I grafted a short piece of wood onto a rootstock, and that splice was made right in this vicinity. You can kind of see a swelling right here. That's where the graft union was. So everything that's grown since is all this hard cider variety. It's one of the bittersweets. And those 2 buds that were on that piece of wood called a scion, I let one of those buds develop a shoot. Now 3 years later, there's the beginning of branches. That is the birthing of a tree. 100, 200 years ago, most people had more of a connection with the land. And having 2, 4, even 12 fruit trees in your yard was part of your home food system. You know, I've seen this map put together by the New York Extension people, showing a black dot for every 100 apples in New York State 150 years ago. And the state is evenly distributed with black dots. Flash forward to, I think the year of this publication was like 1972, and you see some black dots, a few dozen along the Great Lake shore, and some in the Hudson Valley. But really the heart of the state has been emptied because people have made that transition to the modern lifestyle. This vision of many different families getting involved with growing their own fruit and their own vegetables, all the types of foods we can grow, but particularly fruit, was common 150 years ago. And we've fallen away from that, letting the commercial trade grow our fruit because it's more convenient. Most people don't know how fantastic fruit is when you pick it tree ripe. And I'm talking anything from plum to peach to cherry to apple to pear. And you get to say, I grew this. This came from my tree. My family grew this.
Michael, tell us about what do spots have to do with healthy apples? What does this mean to you? Why is that important?
Everybody knows the saying, an apple a day will keep the doctor away. And so that was contrived, somewhere in the 1800s. But today, that's not necessarily the case. And let's look at how we grow fruit. When we introduce synthetic fertilizers, when we use spray medicines, fungicides, that basically tell the tree, you know, that phytochemistry stuff, the way you resist disease as a tree, well, you don't have to do that. We got medicines for that. What we end up with is emptier fruit. Fruit that doesn't have the vitamins and minerals, fruit that doesn't develop all the antioxidants and the different phytochemicals that our bodies in turn use to resist disease. And so maybe the saying today is 64 apples will keep the doctor away. But where I'm really coming from with this is the notion that when an apple gets a few scab spots, it gets some sooty blotch, it in turn is being stimulated to produce certain phytochemicals to not succumb to that disease. So in a holistic orchard, an organic orchard, where I recognize I can't totally eliminate that, that's a good thing. This is the apple that one a day will keep the doctor away.
Next, I meet with a group of volunteers who are transforming a useless lawn into an edible landscape. I attend a PERMABLITZ in Portland, Maine.
Welcome everybody, thank you all for coming this morning. This is the 4th in our series of PERMABLITZes in the greater Portland area. Around 12:30 we'll break for lunch. We'll work again in the afternoon from 1:15 to about 3:15. We'll start cleaning up around then. That's always a little bit loose ending, but we try to hold 4 p.m. as a firm ending time for folks so that we can just make sure that people can, we can respect that ending time.
And we have kind of the wild area on the back of the property. We have a few fruit trees, and we're going to work on creating a bigger foresty area and some plant gilding, and create some great microclimates in that.
So, does anyone have any questions about the day or the projects or anything like that? Sweet.
I think it's the most sustainable, more than anything.
Yeah.
And anyone can do it. That's what's great about it. You know, it's like you're taking your own power back as far as feeding yourself, even. You know.
I think for me, it just feels like it's something that's beyond politics. It's beyond divisiveness and like breaking things down, and instead, it's building, like coming together to build things that we want.
The pear trees are 3 years old, and they bore fruit this year, the first year, which was pretty exciting. And then we have a cherry tree, which is 2 years old. It's a little dwarf cherry, so it won't get too large, but it's still pretty exciting. And that had a couple cherries on it. We planted 8 hazelnuts today, which we expect to see hazelnut fruit in 3 years.
So I think there's lots of very specific problems, like I think climate change, peak oil, economic instability, questions of social justice, wealth inequality. I think those are all kind of specific problems that in all different ways permaculture approaches to particular communities or permacultural solutions. Basically, like permaculture principles can be applied to those problems as solutions. But I also think that just across the board, there's a lot of fear and a lot of like paralysis and people feeling like there's really no hope or nothing to do. And so specifically, I think permaculture in practice, the way that we've been doing it today with this type of work party, just gives people a chance to connect. It gives people a chance to feel like there's really something I can like wake up and go do.
I think it's more than just growing plants. It's more than just providing local food. Permaculture really is that culture piece of things. It's those people coming together. It's creating communities.
Exercise too. I mean, I love coming to these things because you get to be intensely involved with people and then intensely involved with a very physical thing, and then to see very quickly a tremendous transformation.
You know, my crop of such and such isn't doing so great this time. Oh, but my neighbor's got abundance of it, so
yeah.
You know, we'll swap. You know what
Sure.
I mean, and we can share. Oh gosh, you know, share. Gee whiz, we don't have to all have our own lawnmower and our own snowblower and all like this. We can actually share it. Wow, what an amazing thing, you know. I mean, we lost that, you know, of this, you know, oh, I need the ego is taken over and we need these, you know, oh, I need my own thing. And for what, you know, really? So we can, you know, live in isolation, you know.
The idea of replacing lawns, which are really an artificial construct, with gardens is very appealing to me.
Any little bit that you can do is worth it. I mean, it doesn't have to be a huge scale thing. I mean, if you can start just a little tiny garden, do it. And, you know, if you can even start a windowsill garden, do it. Like it's baby steps here. Just start with those. You won't get discouraged, and you can do anything after that.
Next, I'm told there's a man who's taken a very creative approach to growing healthy food and reducing environmental pollution.
This is the original tractor here. This is a solar Cub, 50 vintage Farmwell Cub I built about 10 years ago to see if we could run a tractor with solar power. And it's worked very well ever since. So what I'm doing here is running the motor through a tooth belt drive back through the power takeoff and back into the transmission backwards.
Huh.
And then I can use all the gears to run the tractor the way it normally would.
And now, John, is this your own design, or how do you figure this out?
Well, I just figured out how to power electrically. And when I originally did it, I still wanted to have the gas drive coming from the front too, to compare the two.
Yeah.
But I don't do that. I've taken the pistons out and everything. So I just have the crankshaft. This is 6 batteries up here, and then 4 more back here, which gives me a 110 volt series.
And how much do these batteries weigh? What's the weight here?
Okay, now this tractor only has about 700 pounds of batteries in it, because they're the small batteries.
Wow.
And so that's about 3/4 of a gallon of gasoline. So it has a 750 watt array on top here, which is about 1 horsepower coming in when the sun shines directly, which it's not doing today. So this array will charge a whole 10 battery pack, which is a 120 volt system in series, which will do some serious work.
Why did you decide to do this? What drove you to do this? This is sort of a test, right? Or...
Yes, well, I've started at this from the peak oil viewpoint, realizing that sooner or later, we can argue about that till the cows come home, about when we're going to run out of oil. But sooner or later, and right now we're starting to go downhill, there's just not enough oil, like there's been in my lifetime, to keep feeding people and running our transportation system and our economy and our lifestyle the way we've become accustomed. We have all types of fruit trees, from pears to apples to peaches, apricots. This last August, our one new peach tree out here had so much peaches on it that it broke the branches.
Really?
Yeah, it broke them right down, and so we had to prop them up.
And so how many pounds of peaches did you get from your tree this year, would you say?
Well, on one little tree, we probably got 100 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how many chemicals do you spray on the tree?
We don't spray any chemicals.
And how many hours of work do you spend pruning the tree this year?
Hardly any.
Wow.
That's the beauty of the peach trees.
Doesn't enhance GDP when people go to the hospital less. It doesn't enhance GDP when people realize that they're fulfilled in their communities, doing things like growing food and creating music and doing social enterprise locally.
We outsourced our dinner to a lot of multinational companies, and we need to take that responsibility back, take that power back into our hands.
Rather than have mainstream folks think that, this is the zombie apocalypse or some sort of really negative doom and gloom outcome, what if we've already built living, breathing, functional models of feeding ourselves even here in the city?
Any effort to bring food front and center and source it ourselves as opposed to depend on it to be brought to us by somebody else is a good effort.
Our daily choices are as important as our long-term goals. If our daily choices don't align with our environmental concerns, no matter how lofty our long-term goals are, it's not going to matter.
But the real solution has got to come from the community and from our culture. There needs to be strong cultural changes.
So the idea of having, everybody plant 3 to 5 trees would be a great way to start.
So I think it's about time that I plant some trees. Production support for this film is made possible in part by OrchardRevolution.com. We dare you to plant 5 fruit trees.